The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA. You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz.
The Celtics sent 2 second-round picks alongside Georges Niang, and in return from the Utah Jazz received rookie wing R.J. Luis in return, and that's per Shams Charania. And the Jazz can then use the trade exception earned by sending John Collins to the Clippers to absorb Niang's contract is the other part of what Shams reported. We'll dive into the specifics and why that's important. But for those of you who are monetarily inclined and like the numbers, Niang set to earn $8.2 million before next season once he hits unrestricted free agency. And that is incredibly important to how this deal worked from both sides, the monetary aspect. So the Jazz had money to pay before the season began and can use some of the money from John Collins' deal. Okay, that's important. But what's probably more important and why this deal actually happened is shedding the final year of Niang's salary for next season means Boston will be able to save $8 million in luxury taxes and allow it to stay under the second penalty apron following the addition of Chris Boucher. And they just signed Chris Boucher for $3.3 million, who was formerly on the Raptors, an Oregon Duck from the 2016 Oregon team that made a deep run. And the other main importance of this and why this trade matters for the Celtics and thus the Utah Jazz is the Celtics tax bill drops from $73 million to $30.4. And that is an enormous drop. So they're now $10.2 million below the second apron and $1.7 million over the first. So that's why the Celtics made this deal. And it's an interesting one because Georges Niang's from around Boston, and he was having a little homecoming. He had his best season as a pro last year. We'll dive into more of that. But I wonder how Georges Niang feels. Is it bittersweet to not be on the team that he likely grew up rooting for? However, Georges Niang likes Utah and is appreciative of it. Now, why would the Jazz make this trade for Georges Niang when they're trying to go through this youth movement? That is an interesting question. So let's go through it from a couple reasons, and we'll attack this in a multi-pronged approach. The Jazz should be excited for a plethora of reasons. And the prime one among them should be the Jazz got one of the best locker room guys in the entire NBA. We're going to touch on some of that and an anecdote I have from my first year working with the Jazz a little bit later. But a thought I have that will dispel some Jazz fans that are worried about him taking the Ace Bailey shots. And, you know, I know that some of that's made in jest on Twitter, but there are fans that say, why are we getting guys that'll take minutes away? I'm going to put some thoughts of my own out there and give you reasons why that should not be an interest and hopefully quell that concern. Aside from that, though, here are the other big reasons to take this deal for the Utah Jazz. The Jazz received 2 second-rounders and pretty good second-rounders for free. That's what they did. And that's a no-brainer. Plus, they got a great glue guy in Niang, and that has nothing to do with the off-court stuff, but that's speaking strictly on the court. He connects people as a connective tissue piece. He knocks down open shots, and he plays hard. He's communicative. And that has nothing to do with his perhaps greatest value of being a leader and a great locker room guy. But they got 2 second-rounders for free. The Jazz got second-rounders in 2027 and 2031. For those of you who really care about which pick it is, the Jazz are getting the better of Cleveland or Boston's 2031 second-round pick and the better of Boston or Orlando's 2027 second-round pick. So the Jazz are a team that has made a lot of deals using second-round picks as incentive. They've even sweetened the deal for guys that they couldn't pay or did not want to pay and wanted out that no one else wanted to pay either by giving up second-round picks. The Jazz now replenish their store. They restock the pantry, if you will. And the Jazz have been able to make a lot of those moves due to having the flexibility of having first-round picks and second-round picks. And the Jazz can have that once more. I think the Jazz are going to be thrilled about making this deal because they're going to get value out of those picks and value out of Georges Niang. It's as simple as that. Now, Georges Niang is an excellent shooter. Like, we'll talk about his impact off the court and in the locker room more specifically, and how that translates to impacting on the court. But he's an excellent shooter. He's got a track record of success as a 3-point shooter that is really, really long-standing. And yes, he's been on teams that have been good. And I don't expect him to light it up necessarily as a guy who's going to do more than just be a beneficiary of movement offense and he'll spot up and knock down corner threes. But he's been a very good shooter since early in his days with the Utah Jazz. And since he's journeyed around, played with the 76ers on a playoff team. He's played on a playoff team with the Cavaliers as they were the best team in the East this past year. He had his career year there. He went to Quinn Snyder and the Hawks at the trade deadline and has continued to thrive. Georges Niang may be made fun of for being slow-footed. He may be called the minivan and all these different things, but the guy can really play basketball and is knocking down shots at a level that very few NBA players are able to do. Is he going to be a star of a team? No. Is he going to be even the sixth man? No. But is he going to be a valuable contributor no matter how successful your team is, proving he can do it on some of the most offensively successful teams in modern NBA history, as well as some of the best teams in NBA history, in the NBA the last couple of years? Yes. And that's what the Jazz are getting for free. Like, they gave up a guy that did not get drafted. Now, I will say this. RJ Luis Jr. is a guy that I believed more highly in, and I thought more highly of than I did John Tonje, who the Jazz selected with their second-round pick. So I was a little bummed to see him dealt because I thought he brings one thing the Jazz do not have and have not had for a long time, and that's the length and versatility to become a stopper. He was the player of the year in the Big East, and he was a defensively oriented player whose main attributes were being disruptive. And that's something I think the Jazz have lacked, though there's a reason he fell all the way as an older player to outside the draft. So the Jazz got a guy who's been productive, is a fantastic locker room guy, and 2 second-rounders for a guy who wasn't picked at all in the NBA draft and had issues with Rick Pitino at St. John's despite winning Player of the Year. Georges Niang's back with the Utah Jazz, and that's what we're going to discuss now about his impact on the Jazz, and less about the logistics, more about Niang, and an interesting story I once heard about Georges Niang. So for those of you who are not as long-standing Jazz fans and are wondering what he brought this past year and what he brought to the Jazz before, I touched on it. His biggest attribute is his shooting, but he appeared in 79 games split between the Cavs and the Hawks last season when he averaged a career high 9.9 points per game, 3.4 boards, and 1.4 assists per game. And that's on about 21 minutes of basketball game. And on the Cavaliers, that was a loaded team and specifically a loaded front court. Very, very impressed with what he brought there. But the story that I think is the most important thing about Georges Niang is I remember my first year at the Jazz was the last season the Jazz made the playoffs. And I heard vibes weren't as good, but I didn't know if I could believe them because the Jazz, to me, felt for the most of the season, and especially the beginning of the season, that they could contend. They didn't necessarily seem like championship contenders, but a team that I'd grown used to saying, you know what, a second round would be pleasant. I'd love us to go further, but I don't know if we quite have the horses to do that. But I think we can make the second round if things go really well, maybe a Western Conference Finals. And I believe that. But as the season kept going on, there was a bunch of fourth quarter blown leads. There were rumors of Donovan Mitchell discontent, frustration with Rudy Gobert. There was Donovan not passing to Rudy rumors that were built up on Twitter. And they even got addressed at an interview with Quinn Snyder that I attended. The Jazz had games where they led by 20 and lost, and they led the NBA in most fourth quarter blown leads, most leads of 10 plus that just went awry and we lost the game. But yet the Jazz were still good. They still had every ability to win a series, maybe even 2. But years later, I was still working for the Jazz, and I remember I was speaking to someone, and I asked them, you know, what really went wrong with the Utah Jazz? Because from my eyes, when they played well, they were just as good, if not better, than some of the prior Jazz teams. It was just that they played well in streaks as opposed to throughout a full game. And I said, what really goes wrong in the locker room that the Jazz are so much worse and easier for other teams to play and believe they can beat, even when the Jazz have these dynamic stretches of being an offensive studly team, a team that can really score the basketball. And defensively, yes, they were very reliant on Rudy Gobert, but still statistically one of the better defensive teams in the NBA. So how were they a team that blew all those leads? How did that happen? And I spoke to this guy, And he simply said they lost Georges Niang. That was exactly his words. And I looked at him like, what? Like, I know Georges Niang's rapport with everyone's great, and he brought great energy, he brought great humor and professionalism, but I didn't realize how integral he was to the Utah Jazz and their success. And the best team that the Jazz have had in a long while was a team that Georges Niang was kind of quietly as catalyst for.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first order.
Are the Chicago Bulls finally ready to admit their mistake with Patrick Williams?
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast.
P. Will, the Chicago Bulls reportedly are in the place right now where everything is on P. Will. Now, this is something that we heard early in the offseason, that everything was on P. Will right now. Well, according to Evan Sidgery of Bleacher Nation, he talked a little bit about Patrick Williams' situation, and he talked specifically about how there's nothing guaranteed for P. Will, is that P. Will is going to have to earn his role with the Chicago Bulls this upcoming year. And when I saw this article, it was like music, because the one thing that I think a lot of people, and me and Pat have discussed a little bit here as well, is that the people question, would P. Will be still in the rotation based off his contract, if nothing else? And I had, when me and Pat had that conversation, my response was, I hope not. Like, if P. Will is going to be in the rotation, let him earn it. If P. Will is going to be getting, even if it's coming off the bench, let him earn it. No longer should the Bulls be affording P. Will any type of luxury just because he was their first draft pick here. That doesn't matter anymore. He was the fourth overall pick. Yeah, cool. But that didn't, it's not that anymore. We got to move on from that. You have new players now here with the Bulls, and I'll read the exact Elias Schuster report here in a second. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to it is that with P. Will, every year that you add more forwards to this team, P. Will has to do more to stand out. And we now know Modest Buzelis is the starting power forward. He's not losing that role. You can tell by the way that the Bulls push him, the way that he is in social media, and just the player that he is. He stepped into a role that Patrick Williams had last year, and he thrived in it by not really getting that many more shots. And the more shots that he was getting, which was about 1.5 more shots from P. Will, just came from being more active. I've seen so many people try to make some excuses about, the Bulls were playing completely different basketball when Modest Buzelis moved to the starting line. They were using him completely different. No, what you saw in the difference there was somebody who gave a damn. That's what you saw. You saw somebody who came out there and was willing to give the effort that it took to stay on the basketball court. That's what you saw. So now with Modest clearly the starting four, that brings in, all right, well, can P. Will slide over to the three? So many Bulls fans over the last few years, oh my God, put him at the three. When he moves to the three, he's going to be unlocked. No. With Noah Essengay there, with Julian Phillips, who I think even he was better than P. Will defensively last season and playing in transition. He was getting off the bench before P. Will towards the end of that season. And you have Kevin Huerter as well, who's going to be playing that three role. And Noah Essengay is going to be trying to fight for minutes somewhere in there. The opportunity and the lane for P. Will to get opportunities on this team lessens every single year. Now, I want to get to Elias Schuster and what he said in regards to Patrick Williams into that. He said, indeed, the Bulls appear willing to eat their 5-year, $90 million mistake. They're not going to force the issue with Williams and continue to uplift him amid subpar results. As frustrating as it is that they put themselves in this situation in the first place, I cannot help but respect that mindset. The Bulls have too many young pieces to evaluate and develop to waste time waiting for Williams to come into his own. One thing Elias Schuster is doing there is he is speaking for the majority of Bulls fans. You guys know I was a P. Will defender for a while there. I was probably one of the last people in the Bulls community to turn on P. Will, because I just thought, like, give him a chance. You know, he's this, like, and then you say things that you got people say things like this. He doesn't fit any NBA team. That's not correct. P. Will would fit any NBA team if he actually play like this. The problem isn't P. Will's skill set. It's not his inability to fit a NBA team. It's that he doesn't care. The biggest problem with P. Will has nothing to do with skill set. P. Will has a modern skill set. He can shoot the three ball decently enough, and he can play defense. The problem is that P. Will doesn't care. He's not one of those people who cares the most about basketball, and you can tell in that. He's too passive, right? One of the problems, like, for example, Matas Buzelis played in a way that you knew eventually those minutes were going to come for him. You saw the desire from him to get those minutes. P. Will, somebody that I guarantee you, if Billy Donovan came to him right now and said, yeah, we got 12 minutes off the bench for you, people will say, okay, yeah, cool. Thank you for that. If you go to Matas Buzelis and say, we got 12 minutes off the bench for you, Matas will look at you and say, for now. And he would go out there and put in the work necessary to move into it to where you have to play him. P. Will don't have that drive. He don't have that. So now to hear that P. Will is at the place where the Bulls, I should say, are at the place that P. Will now can be, well, the Bulls are like, P. Will, if you're going to be into this rotation, you got to go out and earn it. You got to go out and earn it. And hopefully he does. Like, I'll say this. If P. Will comes into this training camp and he earns a role with the Bulls and plays that way at the start of the season, I'll shut the hell up. Cool, great, no problem, no hard, no foul at that point. But how many times over the last few years have we seen P. Will lose his starting position? We've all known he was going to have the starting position again, or at the end of the season he loses it, and flip around at the beginning of the season, he's right back into the same starting position. There have been so many caveats afforded to P. Will over the last few years that I'm glad the Bulls are late to the party, but I'm glad they finally arrived, because you are now at the place where many Bulls fans have seen this going for years at this point in time. P. Will ain't it. And I know that's not the most analytical conversation or piece to have around this, but he's not it. He hasn't shown himself to be it. He hasn't shown himself to want it either. And so much of this is desire. And one of the biggest things for me, which was a turning point for me personally on P. Will, was the fact that he slid defensively last year. And I for one, hope for him it was the foot. If it was the foot and P. Will can get back to being a 9.5 point per game scorer on 40% shooting efficiency and multifaceted defender, there's a role for that. It's not $18 million worth. It's not $90 million worth it, though. But that's the Bulls' point. The Bulls should have come to this place off season ago, before they gave P. Will $90 million. And the market was telling you there's no way in hell P. Will's getting that money from anybody but y'all. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Hayes, you think we can recoup some value this year enough to no, there's, and that again, in which you would have to play P. Will to hope to recoup any value. And if he doesn't earn a role, he's not playing. He shouldn't be playing. At this point, the Bulls need to be willing to do what other NBA teams have done. It's a bad contract. You may just have to eat it. So it just is what it is when it comes down to it. I don't think it's going to change. Well, I do think that P. Will's mindset's going to, the way they use P. Will is going to change. But at this point, anybody saying, let's play P. Will to up his trade value, you're just as bad as AK was last year. We should be playing for development. That's it. We should be playing for development. So let's see what happens here. But, I feel like this is a good step and a right step for the Chicago Bulls to be making, to be at the place where nothing's guaranteed for P. Will anymore. Too much has been guaranteed for him with not enough results for far too long. And it's really time that again, let him go out and earn it. Let him outplay Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, Isaac Okoro, Noah Essengay, and Kevin Huerter. If you can outplay those five guys and earn a role on this team, great. If you don't outplay them, we got guys. We got people that are here that I tell you what, Dalen may not be the shooter P. Will is, but I think Dalen played with a lot more energy down the course of that season. And I think that what we saw from Dalen before we got to make a decision to extend him or not, I'd rather take a look at that. Julian Phillips is better in transition. Not the shooter that P. Will is either, but I think he's a better rebounder and rim protector. I'd rather see that at this point. You brought in Isaac Okoro for his point of attack defense. I'd rather see that. So we'll see. Like, again, I hope for P. Will's sake that the defensive dip was because of the foot. Because if it was, great. If it wasn't, it's gonna be a tall test for you to get back into this rotation if that was the case, again, in my personal opinion.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. With Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast.
Cade, man. Cade, what can I say? I mean, like, he makes me smile. He makes me happy. He he's been one of my favorite players since he was at Montverde. Watched every game, Oklahoma State. I still feel like I'm not proven right. I still feel like it. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like there's more. I feel like there's just so much more that he can do, so much more that I believe he can do. But last summer had some takes. This year he pretty much accomplished everything. All NBA team, all-star game, made the playoffs for the first time. And this is after the first 2 years of just abysmal hoops from the Detroit Pistons. A lot of stuff going on in terms of just injuries to himself, missing most of the year. The year before that, playing with a bad foot. Just to kind of run it all down, to go into your year 3, year 4 season with these guys and to just perform at an elite level. I'm talking about have the usage rate of Luka, being able to put up the insane numbers, have big time performances, offensively, be the entire Detroit Pistons. And, of course, with a little bit of help from J.B. Bickerstaff and them bringing in shooters and stuff like that. And, of course, from the young core that we'll talk about. But just talking about Cade, he was in some nasty conversations last summer. He was in some real disgusting conversations with Scotty Barnes and stuff like that. And I don't mean to throw names and throw shade, but for me, he was never in those conversations. I feel like he was in those conversations with Jalen Brunson and the Halliburtons of the world. And I feel like he's shown that this year. And now it's only progression from here, and I think they've built a quality foundation, quality stability over there in Detroit, and it starts and it ends with Cade Cunningham.
So, like you mentioned, you were really high on Cade this past summer. Season plays out. All-NBA team, all-star team, breaks the playoff win drought for the Pistons for the last 15 years. First playoff win since 2008. Actually, 16 years, to be honest. It's crazy. Did all of that. And you said you feel like that there's still more there. So before we get to what you believe he can even improve upon now, was there anything this past year, despite how high you were on Cade, that you were shocked to see from him? Or was everything last year you were just like, oh, yeah, I expected that?
I didn't think the 3-ball would be that consistent, especially with the usage that he had. With somebody with that high of a usage, you expect the 3-ball to fluctuate. But it just honestly, in terms of his scoring, because for the most part, Cade never really had too many bad stretches in terms of just scoring the ball. He had some efficient nights, he had some inefficient stretches, but there was never a moment, I feel like, throughout the season where it was like he was rubbing it off 15, 20 games or under 20 points a game and stuff like that. For the most part, he was pretty consistent in putting up those numbers. And then the 3-point shot was there, the mid-range shot was there. I would love if they can just make it a little bit more easier for him. I think that'd come with Ivy being a little bit more healthy, them being a little bit more creative on offense. But for the most part, the 3-ball, of course, and then just him being consistent as a scorer. I mean, throughout the year, he was there for us when we needed him to be, whether it was a scorer or a playmaker. Even on defense, he made some timely defensive plays. And for a guy with the type of usage, for a guy that young, I felt like he kind of, rose to the occasion, and you didn't really see too many bad stretches from him.
All right, so let's get into this upcoming year. It's going to be a big year for the Pistons. Their first year, I think, coming off of like a real successful year where there's going to be expectations. So now, after the season Cade just had, what are you expecting to see from him this year, and what do you think he has to improve on to take this next step into maybe like firmly top 10 status?
I think the ball handling and the turnovers are, 1-1. I do think the ball handling still needs to improve. I don't think it's tough for a 6'6", 6'7" guy to improve on just speed. I feel like, and that's not really a part of his game. He's more craftiness, footwork. But I feel like the handle needs to improve. The left hand, right hand finishes at the rim. It was weird because on B-Ball Index, he's like really good in terms of finishing talent, which means he makes tough layups, but doesn't have the highest percentage at the rim. And then of course, just, the turnovers, the lackadaisical ones, because I feel like I don't mind the turnovers where you're trying to make a tough pass. Okay, but the lackadaisical ones are the ones that really bother me. And with a guy that controls the game so much, I understand why he has those lackadaisical ones, probably because he's too tired or just, running out of gas. But I do need those to cut down if he wants to get into that upper echelon. And I'm looking at it as, you're trying to get into that SGA, Luka, Steph Curry, Brunson tier. I feel like right now, if he's not at the floor of that tier, he's probably at the top of the next tier with Hallie, with Trae Young and John Morant and all them other guards. He can get to that next level. He definitely can get to that next level because I feel like on the defensive end, he shows effort, and offensively, he can do a little bit of everything. But I would say the ball handling for sure, and then just cutting the turnovers down.
Yeah, the turnovers definitely were a bit much at times this past year. You mentioned like high usage players, they're going to turn the ball over a lot. It's kind of the thing you have to live with. But there's definitely a line that you can't cross, and Cade definitely was getting too far over that line at times with the turnovers, especially like you mentioned, the careless ones. He had a lot of ones where it was just like, what? Why? It doesn't even seem like he really cared about throwing the pass. It was like, what was going on? Along with that, the finishing, I think 100% has to improve. You mentioned it. The B-Ball Index grade a few years ago